can anybody guess what this is? Yeah, it's a cell. Zygote. Yeah, it's a zygote. That means a fertilized egg, a human one. And so this will develop into a human body if all goes well. So recently we've been receiving some really wonderful teachings from Geshe Yeshe Tapke about dependent arising, which is one of the best ways to understand emptiness, the true nature of all things. So basically, the idea of dependent arising is that whatever exists depends on other things for its existence. There's nothing that is independent, standalone, able to exist all by itself without depending on anything else. So that might seem obvious, but the point is that the way we see things, the way things appear to us, and the way we buy into the way they exist is the opposite of this. So when things appear to us, they appear as if they were independent, as if they could exist on their own without depending on other things. So, for example, when we see a body, for example, any of the bodies in this room, it probably appears like something that always existed just the way it is right now. It probably never occurs to us that a body once looked like this, right? There's a big difference between this and our body. Yeah, so that gives us some sense of how we see things as if they were independent, as if they exist just the way they appear right now. They've always been that way, they always will be that way. And that's obviously not the case. So contemplating dependent arising really helps to break down and break through such mistaken appearances and mistaken conceptions. And there's different ways to look at dependent arising. There's different ways that things depend on other things. And probably the easiest is in terms of causes and conditions. So all the things that we perceive and encounter and interact with in the world are things that depend on causes and conditions. So there had to be causes and conditions for them to come into existence and also continue to exist. And this can sound kind of abstract. So it's helpful to take a concrete example, a real example, like a body. It could be your own body or someone else's body. And this fits very well with the retreat that's going on right now. On the 4 establishments of mindfulness. The first of those 4 is the body. So you've probably all been meditating on your body. And when we do this practice of mindfulness on the body, we mostly think of our body the way it exists now, like our present situation. But it's helpful to understand that our bodies weren't always the way they are now. So way back at the beginning of our life, they were like this, a zygote. And it's very tiny. It's 7/10 of a millimeter. So probably too small to see with our naked eye. And this photo is probably magnified a few thousand times or million times. So this is the very first and principal cause of our body. And it's also helpful to think that this itself arose from causes. This itself depended on causes and conditions to come into existence, mainly the egg and the sperm that were separate and then came together, and then the egg got fertilized and became a zygote. And then the egg and the sperm also depended on causes. They were produced by the bodies of the parents, the mother and father. And then those bodies depended on causes, and so on. So you start thinking about causes and conditions, you can go way back ad infinitum, all the way back to the Big Bang. So scientists say that all our bodies originated in stardust. So I wondered about that. So I checked on the NASA website and it confirms it. It says, though the billions of people on Earth may come from different areas, we all share a common heritage. We are all made of stardust. From the carbon in our DNA to the calcium in our bones, nearly all of the elements in our bodies were forged in the fiery hearts and death throes of stars. So that's pretty wild. Sounds like Star Trek. But anyway, let's not go there. Let's go back to the zygote. And here in this photo, it looks frozen, like not changing, not doing anything. But in reality, it is changing. So as soon as an egg is fertilized by the sperm, then it starts going through pretty dramatic changes. The cells divide and then specialize, and different organs start to develop. And in fact, in just 22 days, there's already a rudimentary heart inside the embryo pumping blood. So that's pretty amazing. And then limbs start to form, the beginnings of arms and legs and so on, and also the sense organs, the eyes, the ears, and so on. So the next photo, this is what the body looks like about 9 weeks on, and now it's called a fetus. It's still very tiny, about the size of a peanut. And in fact, it hardly looks like a human being. It looks more like some kind of sea creature. But anyway, you can see little arms and legs and fingers and toes and some organs developing inside. And then it continues to grow and develop. And it depends on more causes and conditions because it is fed, you can see the umbilical cord, it's fed by nutrients from the mother. So it gets what it needs, nutrition, oxygen, and life support from the mother's blood through the umbilical cord. So this shows more causes and conditions that are needed for a body to develop. So it continues growing and developing. And then a few months later, it becomes like this. Although I don't know, I doubt that this is an actual photo. I mean, I think they just took a baby and drew an embryo around it. Photoshop. But anyway, you get the idea. So in fact, there's videos online that show the whole development of a body in the womb. I mean, fast forward, of course, but they were too long to show here. But I recommend, when you come out of retreat and you have a chance to go on the internet, it can be very useful to look at how a body develops depending on all these different causes and conditions. So I think it's really helpful for understanding of the Dharma. In Geshe Yeshitake's teachings, we learned various points about how things arise dependent on causes and conditions. And I think this example of a zygote developing into a body can illustrate these. So one of these points was that causes and conditions have to be impermanent themselves. They have to be things that are subject to change, because things that are permanent and unchanging would not be able to produce any results, because in order for results to arise, for effects to arise, the causes and conditions have to go through changes. So this is clear with the zygote. If the zygote was frozen, which does happen, they put them in the deep freeze sometimes, and in that situation they won't be able to change and produce a human body. So changes have to take place in causes and conditions in order for results like a human body to arise. So that's one sort of principle of causality. Also, causes and conditions have to be multiple. It isn't possible for one single thing, one single cause to produce a result. It needs other things together with it. And this is also illustrated here. Just the zygote alone can't produce a human body. It needs, for example, the nutrition from the mother's body. So without that, it would shrivel up and die. It wouldn't turn into a human body. And then the mother, to be able to provide nutrients to this growing embryo, needs food. She needs a healthy diet. And the food comes from farmers and so on and so forth. So you start looking at causes and conditions, and it really spreads out and expands in many areas. Another point is that causes and conditions have to have the ability or the potential to produce that particular effect. So a human zygote contains the necessary elements like DNA to grow into a human body, but a dog zygote wouldn't be able to produce a human body, nor could a tomato seed. Yeah. So that seems obvious, but still it's good to think that if you want a particular result, you have to have the right causes and conditions. Like we want to achieve enlightenment, so we have to bring together the right causes and conditions that will bring that about. Another thing is that causes and conditions themselves depend on causes and conditions, like I was talking about before. Yeah, that they themselves had to arise from other causes and conditions. So when you start thinking in that way, you can really go far and way back in time. Also, one other thing is, this was mentioned a lot in the text that Geshe Topke was teaching. There's no creator that created everything. So this is an idea that many people in the world believe in. And many of these people also believe that the creator, this creator who created everything, is permanent, unchanging, and didn't depend on causes and conditions. Like if you ask, people who believe in a God, well, where did God come from? Oh, he was always there. So he doesn't have causes and conditions. So Buddhism says that if there were such a thing as a permanent, unchanging, uncaused creator, it cannot be a cause. Such a thing would not be able to create results. Because as we saw before, a cause needs to go through changes in order to bring results, to bring effects. So something that's unchanging, never changes, would not be able to produce any results. So this is something that usually takes time to think about, but it's very helpful, very worthwhile. But this doesn't mean we should go around and tell people who believe in a creator that they've got it all wrong. That would be disrespectful and also uncompassionate. Because, as the Dalai Lama often points out, that kind of belief is beneficial for many people. It inspires them to live ethically and to be kind and generous to others and so on. So we should respect people for those beliefs, but in our own mind, with regard to what we think and what we believe, and we can say, no, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, using an example like this of a zygote developing into a human body, depending on many, many different causes and conditions, really helps to illustrate this principle of dependent arising. And for me personally, I find a lot of benefits in contemplating this, how something depends on causes and conditions, especially something like a body, because we tend to be quite attached to bodies, our own bodies, and the bodies of others, especially the ones we find really attractive. And so contemplating this, I really recommend trying it out. So if there's a body that you find attractive, then think about this process, how once upon a time it was this teeny weeny zygote, and then it became this fetus, and so on and so forth. It really gives you a different perspective on that body. And then your mind may think, yeah, but okay, once it was a zygote, but it doesn't look like that anymore. Now it looks like this, really gorgeous. But by the same token, you have to think about the future. Okay, it looks like this now, but it's not always going to look like this. 50 years from now, it's going to look very different. So, yeah, it really helps to break down these concepts that we have, like, wow, there's this attractive body and it's going to look like that forever and it's going to bring me happiness if only I could be closer to it, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's a good antidote for attachment and also for aversion. Any bodies that we find particularly ugly or unattractive could also be helpful to think about this process. And probably, when this person was a little kid, a little baby, they looked cute. Most babies are cute. And so, again, it can help break down concepts that we may have, like, oh, this person is so unattractive and they've always looked that way and they always will look like that, and so on. And contemplating this also helps to deepen our understanding of impermanence, which is very, very important to understand. And also, understanding impermanence helps us, again, decrease our attachment. And emptiness, I mean, that's the kind of ultimate goal of contemplating dependent arising, how things are dependent on other things, is to realize that they don't exist independently, standalone, autonomous, all on their own. And so that it takes time, but breaking through that concept of things being independent enables us to eventually understand emptiness, how things are empty of independent or inherent existence. So I really recommend doing this kind of contemplation of dependent arising with specific things, especially things towards which we may have afflictions like attachment, aversion, and so on. So it helps to reduce those afflictions and give us a more realistic view of things, more in accordance with how they are.